welcome to this segment of Arts Taught. I'm Sherri Burr, your host, and my co-host for this segment is going to be law student Jeffrey Hanna. Welcome, Jeff. Jeff and I and my class are pleased to have as our very special guest Anne Hillerman and Don Strel. Welcome, Anne, and welcome, Don.
Thanks, Sherri.
We're so pleased to have you here. Let's start out with this book. The two of you are co-authors of Tony Hillerman's Landscapes. So can you just sort of explain the making of the book?
Oh, I'd be glad to. My dad was the mystery writer Tony Hillerman. He wrote 19 books in a series that involved Navajo detectives Jim Chee and Joe Leaphorn. So, and in his books, the landscape is really a character. So Don and I were thinking it would be nice to have pictures of the landscape. And so we spent about 3 years driving through Navajo country. Don took the photos. I reread all of Dad's books and found those wonderful quotes where Jim Chee or Joe Leaphorn have to pull off the road because the landscape is just so magnificent.
Right.
So our book it's those quotes, Don's photos, and then some background on the books, a little bit about the plot, about where they're set, and then some of my recollections, say of going with Dad to Canyon de Chelly or Chaco Canyon.
Nice.
So I guess that's that book in a nutshell.
Yeah, so Don, why don't you explain the photography aspect of making these incredible photos of the landscape, of buildings, and of scenes? Can you explain just
Well,
the
Anne and I
process
worked
of
together, and Anne would set the scene, and then I would go photograph, of course. But going out into Navajo country, the reservation's huge, and we had intricate maps of where we would go, what type of picture I would take, and Anne would see the landscape, and that would add to her knowledge of what to say in her text.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't, now you'd see most photographic books, they're taken early morning or late afternoon,
Yeah,
the
isn't
golden
that-
hours.
Right, isn't that a rule of photography? Like
Sure.
not after 10 a.m.
Yep.
and not before 4 p.m.
Right.
Right.
But what I wanted to do, and it was easier too, but what I wanted to do is photograph the way you would see it if you went out driving on the reservation. You would not get up at 6 in the morning to see a particular site or a ruin or a hogan.
Right.
You would be driving during the day, and this is how you'd experience it.
Oh, okay. So then does that create a challenge as a photographer? Are you having to use more filters or being more careful about the lighting settings and the aperture settings?
Yeah, I played a lot after I took the pictures, manual exposure, shooting raw, okay, and then I corrected anything I needed to in Photoshop.
Oh.
Now, what I didn't do was enhance.
Okay.
I didn't make the greens greener or anything like that. But this little camera is a lifesaver.
So all
Climbing
these
cliffs.
magnificent photos with that camera?
No. I had a big one.
Okay, all
A
right.
regular SL Canon 5D. But this one takes 14 meg pictures. It shoots raw and goes into Photoshop seamlessly.
Ah, okay.
So this is a grand camera, and like I can shoot your audience
My
here.
audience of law students, little did they know that they were going to be on camera many ways when they
On one occasion, I was climbing with an anthropologist on cliffs north of Gunnison, Colorado. And we went and saw some charcoal Yebiche figures, which are in the book, drawn on a cave wall. And hiking those cliffs, it was, with this on my hip, it was much easier walking up the scree easier to climb up the rock face rather than having a big camera or a 20-pound backpack full of lenses and cameras.
Okay, gotcha. Jeff, do you have a question for Don or Ann?
Yes, I do, actually. I was wondering, how did the two of you start working together? How did you meet?
I was the arts editor for the Santa Fe newspaper. My background is in journalism. And so I'd been doing that job for a couple years, and Don came to Santa Fe to be the new director of the Museum of Fine Arts. So as part of my job, I got to interview him, and one thing led to another, and now we've been married, what, 32 years? Six? Time flies, huh? And Don and I had worked together on other projects. He had a public relations business, and I would sometimes write the news releases for that. But we had never done a book together like this, where I was, it was a combination of texts and photos.
And what kind of inspired the? I know that Tony's your father, and his, and he's got quite a legacy as a writer and everything. But was there any particular event that kind of inspired the two of you that said, you know what, we need to capture these scenes on photo?
Well, as to live in New Mexico, you have to do a million jobs. So another one of my jobs is directing a program called the Tony Hillerman Writers Conference. And we've been doing that now almost 10 years, but one of the early conferences, our keynote speaker was a New Mexico writer named Michael McGarity. And Michael was going to talk about the role of landscape in his work. And so Don said to him, gee, instead of you just talking, why don't we get pictures of some of the actual settings you use? So Michael thought that was a great idea. The talk was a big success, and my dad was in the audience. And so afterwards, he said to Don and me, gee, that was pretty nice. Why didn't you ever do something like that about me? And it was like a lightning bolt coming down from heaven and striking you. Yeah. So that was really the start of this book.
Yeah, and what was it like to co-author? Because some co-authorships, even those who've been long married, like Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, they got together as co-authors and they almost divorced.
Well,
so how did you keep it?
There was a little situation. We only had one argument. We only had one argument, but we had it daily.
Oh, really? Okay. The same argument daily.
Yes.
And what was that?
And that was, I was working on my photographs and is writing, and she's writing more and more and more. And the editor says, Ann, out of New York, the editor says, Ann, that was great. Expand, get more personal, get away from the journalistic approach, get more personal. And I'm saying, Ann, you can't write anymore. There's too much text. There'll be no room for photographs.
Okay.
And I said, oh, don't worry. We have an editor. That's her job to make sure everything works together. But we didn't realize at the time this was the very first book she had done that combined text and photos. So she was basically as clueless as I was. So we submitted the book, and then the designer had the final say, and she said, no, you've got like 30% more text than we can use. You have to cut back. Don's initial contract was for 220 photos, and they only had room for 100 photos.
Whoa.
And initially, I had done each of the 19 Jim Chee, Joe Leaphorn books as its own chapter, plus Dad's 2 books that were non-series books. One was set in Vietnam, and one was set in Santa Fe in some unnamed place in the Midwest. So then when the what would you say? When the asphalt, the tires hit the asphalt, she said, we have to also cut back on the chapters. So all of the non-series books were taken out. All of the books that had to do with Hopi were combined into one chapter. All of the books that had settings outside the Navajo Reservation, plus the Navajo Reservation, were combined into one chapter. And then a lot of beautiful sites that Don had photos of, we just had to cut.
Oh, that's too bad. I actually liked Finding Moon. That was the one set in Vietnam.
Yeah.
We went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And you went to Vietnam to
photographed it.
photograph,
Yeah.
and it got deleted. Oh, what a shame.
But it was a great trip.
Yeah.
Well, it was worth it for that.
Sure.
Then.
Yeah.
And maybe another book. If this is successful, maybe there'll be a sequel.
Yeah, outtakes.
Yeah. Outtakes, right.
Yeah, actually, we're really happy with this book. I think sometimes you can be so close to your subject that your enthusiasm carries you away.
Right.
And that may have been what happened to us. We loved the Navajo Reservation, and of course, I loved my dad's books, and so it might have been too much of a good thing.
Yeah, I can understand. Well, the best compliment for your book was paid by Jeff Hanna when he was explaining to the class this morning about the books. and he said having read Tony Hillerman's Landscape made him want to go read your dad's books.
Oh, thanks,
Yeah,
Jeff.
well, you know, we do a lot of reading as law students, so it's probably going to have to wait till after the term, but it really did. It invoked a lot of images in my mind, and I can see the inspiration just seeping off the from the photos, and I like the way that you added excerpts from the book that accompany the photos. I thought that was quite fantastic, the way that all came together.
And you know what else was very interesting? Whenever we've done about 70 book signings for this book,
Wow.
mainly,
And
the garden book.
And both, for both,
Yeah.
okay.
And it was fascinating to listen to some of the people come up. You know, I'd sign the book first. Anne would then sign, ask the guest if they would like it inscribed, and they would tell stories about Anne's dad.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
you must have heard many wonderful
Tell
stories.
them the story about the shoe shine lady.
Oh, yeah, that story's in the book, actually. In the high point of my dad's career, he was doing a lot of traveling. And he was a nervous flyer, so he would always get to the airport early. And there was a woman there who shined shoes, so they got to be buddies because he always got his shoes shined. And she wasn't really a reader, but as time went on, she got curious about Dad's books, and so she bought some. And then she brought them with her so he would sign them. Well, then that was a time where he wasn't traveling so much. So finally she stopped bringing them. And then, of course, Dad shows up. So she says, gee, I bought your book. I was hoping you'd sign it, but I don't have it with me. So Dad took her into the bookstore there and bought a copy of his memoir, Seldom Disappointed, had just come out. So he bought that book for her and signed it and gave it to her. And I had never heard this story. So then after Dad died, I got this email from her telling me the whole story. And I thought it was really sweet.
Yeah.
It really touched me.
Your dad is such a wonderful person. I bet there are just tons of stories. I mean, I just thought he was so fabulous because when I first moved to New Mexico, I was looking for an author to come speak to my intellectual property students. And one of my colleagues suggested, why don't you invite Tony Hillerman? So I went and I read his books, and I sent a fan letter telling him how much I enjoyed the book, and he replied back, and he came and spoke to the students, and he came twice. After that, so he was just wonderful to continue to contribute, even to a law school class.
Even a law school class.
Even a law school class, yes. And he would tell stories about how the characters would change. Like he started out thinking this character was going to be a male, but once he went to the location, he decided that it should be a female. And he started out thinking this character should die, but once he was at the location, he thought, well, maybe I'll let that character live. So I think it's so great that you've done this book because the landscape really kind of helped him create the stories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
really did. My dad didn't really believe in writer's block, but he often...
Definitely not.
Definitely not.
He asked me once, how's your writing coming? And I said I had writer's block. And he said that there was a 4-letter word for writer's block. And he said it was L-A-Z-Y. And I felt so embarrassed that, Tony Hillerman had just said I was lazy. I went home and I started writing again.
Could I see the book? Yeah. Now, one of the adventures we had on this road was getting the proofs back.
Right.
And here is Anne Hillerman and Don Strel.
Right.
Well, the first time they sent it back, it said Anne Hillerman. Now, the Hillerman name's pretty big.
Right.
And I said, where's my name?
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, you're the photographer. And I said, no. If you want to use my photographs, I need my name on the book.
Good for you.
And then on the cover, it says, Tony Hillerman's Landscape, on the road with Chi and Leaphorn. But on the title page, it says something, Tony Hillerman's Landscape. Let me get to it. On the road with an American legend.
Ah.
So we had the legend title was a working title. The marketing at the publisher changed it to Chi and Leaphorn. And so this is an anomaly. And it's probably like an upside-down stamp. Great value.
Right. So will they change it in the second printing?
I
So
don't
I
know.
should hold on to my first printing of the book?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
If I were them, I would change it, but you never know.
Right.
But
But
what-
would change it which way? Would they do the
I
American
would change. I think they
legend?
would change it to Chi and Leap Horn,
Oh, okay.
because they're liking to market this book with mysteries. They figure, and I think they're smart, that the the big readership for this book are people who already love Dad's books,
Right.
and then the second tier of readership are people who are crazy about the Southwest and want to see Don's beautiful photos.
Yeah, that's great. Your father passed away a couple of years ago, and that was such a sad event for all of us who loved his work and loved the man because he's such a wonderful person. So what did he do about the copyrights to all these books? Because he has such a treasure trove, and here we've got these students who are studying copyright law and who are studying wills and trusts. What did he do about the copyrights?
Well, Dad, I guess, was smart in that he had an agent who had been with the same agency just about from the beginning of his career. So she had handled most of his contracts. There were a few oddball books that he had done with the University of New Mexico Press, or that he had done for friends, and those things were not with the agent. But basically, she had all of those contracts. So when Dad died, Mom and Dad had set up a trust, and their lawyer said to Mom, "I need a copy of all of Tony's contracts." And so Mom called Dad's agent, and we didn't realize how many there were because of all kinds of movie rights and audio rights and Italian rights and German rights and Russian rights. So it took her a long time to gather all those contracts up. But finally she did, and so then those went in the trust document.
Oh, so he put all the copyrights, all the contracts in trust.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah. And let me just finish this, and then I'll let you edit me here. And his idea was that these copyrights then, after the family had died, then they're going to be given to a nonprofit group, so they can continue to benefit.
Oh, wonderful. So
Yeah.
first to support the family, and then all the revenue from the contracts will support a nonprofit.
Right.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I thought that was
Wonderful.
really a sweet
Yeah.
idea.
Well, there was a little hitch there with the movie rights of I think Chi and Leaphorn, or just Leaphorn. Remember when he sold the rights to the character?
He told us that story to my class because he had signed an option agreement, not realizing that it said once they renew the option for the third time, the company owned all the rights to his character, and he had actually had to pay more than he had received to get Leaphorn back. I think he called it like getting Leaphorn out of jail or something, because the company had basically taken it over, and he hadn't realized that glitch in the contract.
Right. But actually, it worked out well for his readers, because that was how Jim Chi was created.
Oh, it was because
Yeah.
Leaphorn was in jail.
Yeah.
So then he created Jim Chi. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And then when Leaphorn got out of jail, he had them both in a novel together.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I've got something a bit interesting.
Okay.
When we signed the contract for this book, we went with Tony's previous publisher.
HarperCollins.
That was fine. And we were working with a vice president there who had dealt with Tony. And we thought everything, we didn't have an agent or anyone look at it. It looked fine, except we missed one little point. And except for the following books. We will not give another book to another publisher, nor accept an offer for another book from another publisher until a complete manuscript for the work has been delivered to HarperCollins and the author has complied with the option of provisions, paragraph 12.
Wow. So basically,
That
they
kind
have
of
a right of first refusal on all of your work. And on the completed.
Completed.
Yeah, so you don't, because normally
Yeah.
nonfiction books are sold with a proposal.
Right.
Yeah.
So they really have you. Wow.
Well, we're going
Right.
to work to get out of there. Because that is like giving up your firstborn. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
What were we thinking? Well, you get this as a
You get so excited,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you're just happy that anybody cares anything about anything you might ever write again.
Yeah. I
But we
understand.
didn't understand that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
So, and we've been advised since to get an agent.
Yes. Yes, or a lawyer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or both.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
We kind of like the lawyer.
I'm afraid of you guys.
Just so you know, lawyers can be agents, but then they're also versed more thoroughly in the law as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yes,
We're
yeah.
here to help.
Yeah.
We're here to help. Let's ask the law students if any of them have any questions for Anne or Don.
So I had a question for Anne. How did it feel to go back to these landscapes that your dad had talked about and written about, like when you got there? How did it feel?
Oh, it was great. Some of them were places that I was familiar with, like Chaco Canyon and Canyon de Chelly and Window Rock and Shiprock. And some were places I had never been. And it was really fun to go to those places. I had never been to the Hubble Trading Post, for instance, and that was one of my dad's favorite sites. So yeah, I think that was why we got carried away, actually. It was just so much fun finding. Dad loved to write about little places nobody had ever heard of. So Don and I had a lot of fun finding them and then capturing them on film and finding the quotes about them.
Oh, wow. Are there other questions from the audience for Anne or Don? Max, can you stand up so the camera can catch you?
It seemed like you went to a lot of interesting, like you just said, places that are nearly off the map. How would you find them? I mean, how would you track these places down, and what was kind of your toolbox for doing that?
Well, first we would try to use maps. My dad used a wonderful map that AAA put out called Indian Country. And that map has a lot of little roads that are just on the Navajo reservation or on the Hopi reservation, and it marks them if they're dirt or not. But they do their best, but it's not completely up to date. And then also because of weather, a lot of those roads just disappear.
Right.
And then once you get out there, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between what's a real road and what's just a shortcut that people have been taking forever, or what's a trail that they've been using for sheep grazing. So if we thought we were starting to get lost, then we would pull over and try to find somebody to ask. And Don has some good stories about that.
Oh, we would find a Navajo gentleman standing by the side of the road, perhaps, or on one of the streets there in one of the towns. And a very stoic gentleman, and I would pull up the car, roll down the window, and ask him, still stoic, ask him, can you tell me the way to Shiprock, please? With a smile on my face. And then he would just look at me, smile, and say, why do you want to go to Shiprock? And
like
that starts the dialogue, and it's
okay.
wonderful.
You don't get directions without sharing your story.
Of why you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned Indian Country. I mean, your dad received many awards from the Navajos. I think he received the Friend of the Dene Award. They were just so thrilled at how well he captured the culture. And Wes Studi was our guest, and he said one of the things when he first read Tony's novels that he liked was he thought that eventually an Anglo guy was going to come along and solve the crime, but that never happened. I mean, he empowered the Navajo characters, and they were empowered to the very end.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
One
right. In
of the-
fact, usually the non-Navajos end up being the bad guys.
Right. Exactly.
One of the things about photography in that book was I needed releases.
Right.
And if you go to some of the sites that have pre-printed releases and all in some of the books, they're about this long. So I created a little release, unintimidating, that I could put in
Kind of
my...
like the one you signed to be on the show.
No, that's too long.
Oh, that's too long. That's
A lawyer did that.
page. Okay.
Yeah.
There's reasons why we make them long, by the way. Just
Yeah, yeah. And non-intimidating and just great, just grand.
Wow.
Had a good time with it. And in Navajo country, the Navajo Nation, I had to go forward to the cultural affairs director, and there was a fee for photographing.
Oh, okay.
That was fine, and I had to give him dates and times that would be out there. But then when we went to the Hopi res, they said no photographs, period.
Wow.
Period, period, period. And I'd say please, but period, no. And so we